I also don't think.
So just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, the mic is just a gimmick, not to amplify, but
like
to like transfer the sound from here to people online and to recording.
It's a talking stick. So my name is Sjoerd, locally from here, ended up back here. I work at Bonnefante and run B32 Art Space.
Oh, hi, I'm Ohida. I was alumni from Jan van Eyck last year, and they are my friends, so I'm helping them today.
Hi, my name is Amshu. I'm an artist at the Jan van Eyck. I'm an adopted member of GABAA. I'm helping them today.
Hi, I'm Aditi, a comic artist. I live in Hasselt. I also became friends with them very recently.
Hello, my name is Vijay. I was here 12 years ago. I'm an artist, and I have a lot of common friends with GABAA and the others.
I'm Lamon Roy. I'm Colom Brazuca, and I think I'm also, hopefully, a adopted member of GABAA.
I confirm.
And a resident here at Jan van Eyck.
Hi, I'm Lucas. I am from Brazil.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm an aspiring member of GABAA and a resident here at Jan van Eyck. And I'm from Antwerp.
Hi, my name is Emrod. I'm very much intrigued, and I'm from Belgium and from Congo.
Hello, my name is Femke and I'm from Antwerp, Belgium.
Hi, my name is Livia and I'm from Iași, Eastern Romania.
Hi, I'm Maya. I'm from Yugoslavia.
Hi, I'm Katrin. I'm from my villages and live in England.
Yes. And hi, I am Niels. I'm part of Stichting Stokroos, Fund for Art, Design and Crafts.
Hi, I'm Nanne. I'm living in Tilburg and I write for the European Ceramic Work Center, which is a residency devoted to ceramics.
Hi, I'm Nathalie from New Caledonia, also resident here in Jan van Eyck and also adopted by GABAA. Yes.
Hello, I'm Kelvin and from Ghana and I'm also a resident artist here.
Hello, I am Nisreen. I'm from Holland, from Amsterdam. I'm a poet and I'm also adopted by GABAA and a resident at the Jan van Eyck.
Hello, my name is Claire. I'm from New York, and I'm an arts and culture student at Maastricht University.
My name is Mos. I am from the Netherlands, and I'm an artist.
Thank you. Edike. Anahita.
Go for it.
Hi, my name is Elisa. I am from Italy, and I am a 2020 Jan van Eyck participant.
Oh.
Hi, my name is Anahita. I'm one of the artists in residence at Jan van Eyck also.
Hi, I'm Rita Fabiana. I'm come from Lisbon, where I'm curator at Gulbenkian Modern Art Center.
Hi, I'm Rabiul, and I'm part of GABAA.
Hi, I'm Himangshu. I'm also a member of GABAA.
Hello, I'm Surajit from GABAA.
Yeah, so...
Who is GABAA?
Yes, who is GABAA? Or maybe right now in this head, how is GABAA? So for us, art is an urgency. Its pedagogical methodologies are a form of sharing that share our confusions, our gestures of not identifying any ideologies to proceed with. From our immediate urgencies to engaging with the site, the making of GABAA exists as a form of resistance. It is a space for conspiracy, for gossip, political understandings, or even diving into methods of doing postmortems of things, and definitely a space for cooking and eating together. It is an artist-led situation existing both conceptually and physically in Shantiniketan Birbhum, which is in the eastern part of India. It is a slow process of creating networks, communities that exchange and extend dialogues of dismantling ownerships, where we understand power as collectivity and parallel initiations. We are also identifying this collectivity as something which is countering the power narratives. From home to the undercommons, we propose relational care as a methodology to dilute institutional hierarchies and rethink power as collective and distributed. It exists as a parallel third space positioned between undercommons and institutional formal structures. We are intending to register this idea of collective as an integral part of systems itself. It's interdisciplinary, it's research-based, and our practices span from site-specific works, installations, public relations, public engagement, and community-based engagements. Within these, our roles remain fluid. Sometimes we are just listener, sometimes observer, sometimes we are artists or investigators or even detectives. At its core, we, as GABAA, understand intellect as a collective, a shared evolving entity which is beyond ownership.
Maybe we can serve what we have.
Yes, so we will be preparing a little something for you, which is very usual when we have at our back in our homeland. When we sit at a gathering or when we sit to talk among ourselves, what we have is muri and cha. So muri is basically puffed rice, and then we mix it with different ingredients, and then we have it with tea. So today we have that both, and we have Ohida and Amshu helping us with that. And another thing to mention, we will be sharing the muri in a particular thonga. Thonga means a small pocket which is made out of paper, and we request you to do not to throw the paper, because later on we are gonna have a discussion around it. So just have it and we'll discuss more. So some of our thoughts at the moment. We are based in Shantiniketan. It is a place shaped around Vishwabharati University. Initiated by Rabindranath Tagore, this place and its pedagogical approaches were formed as a resistance to the westernized practices of art education at that time, and education in a larger sense. Rabindranath Tagore is a poet, philosopher, visionary, writer, and he was the first Asian who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913. Vishwabharati, as an institution, was initiated as an independent structure, but later on went under the central university systems due to the aspects of financial survival and the political circumstances of post-independence. Moving forward, this institution and the ideologies of it became a space which took the agency of not practicing religious rituals or beliefs. Rather, it focused on the celebrations of its surroundings and its inhabitants. In a way, Vishwabharati University made this pedagogical model which questioned the colonial division of class, caste, religion, and made its very own non-Western methodologies of learning, making, sharing in a single space. Even after it has been more than 100 years of Vishwabharati University in India, we are still going through this phase of normalizing class, caste, communal violence, rapes, murders, domestic violence, mob lynching, religious riots. Now, within all of these discussions of institutions, its purpose, identifications, we are understanding home as the first space for learning, where the learning or even the idea to learning begins. So, on screen, you can see the space and the shared home that we have together in Shantiniketan. From our studentship times, we gathered together to initiate such a situation, space that will carry the processes of learning. We bought land and started to build together a physical space by support from our families and without other support whose idea began from home and continued to incorporate a shared space for learning, making, sharing. It is an approach to move from private to public and in a more shared format. GABAA is a home which is transforming into this larger idea of space, which is not run by bureaucratic systems, but by relations of care, exchange, attention, and neighborhood. We are identifying these ideas as the idea of undercommons. In India, where approximately every 5 kilometers the language changes, food changes, culture changes, in a place like this, a singular homogenized structure cannot work, even in terms of institutions. In our country, there is an evidently low percentage of literacy and right form of education, which in multiple cases is resulting in a mass situation where people are blindly following and being manipulated by right-wing agendas or are controlled by ruling powers. In the same context, we feel there is an urgency of decolonization of powers, decentralization of powers, and dilution of hierarchies in institutional systems. This understanding led us to initiate GABAA, a space, an idea where we are deconstructing these methodologies of homogeneous structures and extending for what is beyond these formats of singular power. We are also consciously trying to generate situations that can act as multiple provocations through meeting with people, meeting with friends, and having people come over and in forms of collaborations. From these learnings and inspirations from our Professor Sanchayan Ghosh, who will join us later, who is already on the call and will be contributing later today, we are actively understanding pedagogy as a practice. Through this methodology, we translate our language into sight, collaboration, and situations. For us, this making and initiation of GABAA itself is a practice. It is an approach and a conscious idea of revolution in the present art language in terms of the specificity of our site. We are intervening also into the dialogues of urgency and art as urgency. We are also consciously questioning and trying to find alternative ways for the accessibility of art. Our urgency of coming together is through the initiation and actions of GABAA.
Centralization of institutions and how through our engagements we are initiating temporary pedagogical sites. Pedagogical sites as to how to study a landscape or how to activate people of that site. We know the equation where people go to institution and we are imagining institution to go to people. We are going to places and through making of conspiracy, gossips, cooking and exchange, mutual sharing, mutual learning is taking place. The knowledge is coming from the people of all age, gender, background, educators, musicians, neighborhood, homemakers, students, anyone and everyone. And that itself is becoming another structure, a pedagogical one, but not within the structure of institution.
So now maybe we wait for a few seconds. So everyone has Moody in their hand and can start on munching. চা কোথায় আছে? And please do like disrupt us, do stop us every in between if you have anything to say or any questions.
Also hold the light for you if you need to.
That's fine. Yeah. So now we will take you through few fragments which has these methodologies and ideas that we are understanding as initiations and understandings of temporary pedagogical sites, and where the institution itself or the sense of institution itself is going to people, not the other way around. Kathar Ghar is a project initiated by GABAA in collaboration with women Kantha makers of Birbhum, where we wrapped and covered our house with the incomplete autobiographies written and stitched by our collaborators. Together with nearly 100 collaborators and participations from few other practitioners, Anshu Kumari, Mousumi Mahato, Momita Boshak, Sriporna Dotto and Shomabho Das, we exchanged this idea of human as a book, where we were understanding humans as the source of knowledge and how this knowledge is being passed on to the next generation. And in this event, women were passing on their generational knowledge that they have gotten from their previous generation, their mothers, their grandmothers, and they were passing it on to their children. When GABAA is becoming a space for meeting, and it is a space which is existing both between the home space for our collaborators and the space where we live in. So at times the purpose of GABAA shifts, and at times the meeting and the purpose and the intention of meetings also shift. And we engage through multiple forms of engagement, understandings. What you are seeing on screen is a part of the image making that we were also engaging at that time. Through these ideas of multiple temporary initiations at a public cultural space, we are continuously trying to disrupt this systematic gaze through initiating simultaneous presentation sessions, where we are trying to dilute this gap and space between speaker and audience, where speaker themselves become audience and also audience take up the space to be a speaker eventually. So over here also in this simultaneous presentation, lecture performance, and when the workshop was going on, we were together uncovering the history of Katha. As you can hear me, I'm multiple times using this particular word Katha, which means it is a Bengali term and it has its history in undivided Bengal and now in Bangladesh and India. And it is a quilt that is made with old reused saris, the one that I'm wearing right now. So our mothers, our grandmothers, they used to stock up the saris when they were not of any more use, and then they would layer it all together and stitch it to make it a quilt and survive the colds. As you can see, one of our collaborators right now, Mousumidi, has worn the sari while writing her own autobiography. Through this particular engagement of Kantharghar, we also tried to understand and question these ideas and beliefs of what does it mean and what are the criticalities of community-based practices and community-based engagement. We have had multiple instances where sometimes this community-based engagement leads up to only a certain form of inspiration that is left with the community, and then artists are removing themselves from the community. And then community has this situation where they do not know what to do with that inspirations. So we started on with these ideas, and we were constantly trying to dilute these gaps. And in the process, we found these different layers that were overlapping with each other. This is where when we would have eventual gatherings and meetings and talk with everyone, like how their day has been or what do they write about themselves when they have no practice of thinking about their own selves. And the particular landscape that we are talking about, it's Birbhum, Shantiniketan, and it is a heavily patriarchal society, and where the idea of women speaking up or idea of women coming out of their homes is also something very rare. Most of our collaborators were from Muslim community, some of them were from Hindu community, and one of them was from Christian community. So this factor of being from different religious communities also contributed how they collaborated, how they represented themselves in public domain, and how they also behaved with their surrounding and neighborhood. As a large part of them were not able to read or write, their children came into the scenario and they wrote for their mothers. They wrote what their mothers wanted to say and how they wanted to register in the public domain for the first time who they are. Before, it's always, like till now also, within a household, it is considered that a household is a woman's job, but the decision making is still a man's thing to do. And within Kantharghar, our collaborators, they were taking up their own decisions, like when they want to engage, in what form they want to engage, and in what ways they want to register their own voices. While sharing these incomplete autobiographies, these women, they were also unfolding the politics of the landscape. They were going into deeper layers of what it meant to be part of that landscape where there was no space for their voices. As we went forward, we also went into this method of wrapping our own house, and how women wrap sari in their own bodies. That same and similar suggestions went into that. যেদিন আমরা ঢাকছি ওইটাতে যা. So this, yeah, I'll read it back. So this is the rented house where we all live. And in Shantiniketan, there are a lot of architectures like this, where people with capital, they come from outside and they buy a land, they build a house, but they never make it home. It's always rented by people like us, and it's taken care by caretakers who are the neighborhood women. So within that scenario, this question of ownership comes up. Who has the ownership of this house? Because all the three bodies, they claim the ownership. The tenants, the caretakers, and the party who bought the land. So this became such an instance which we wrapped and overlapped with the voices from the neighborhood. and with the voices of the women on the outside. So when the day we were covering up the house, we also invited some singing groups from our neighborhood villages, and those singing groups, they addressed the site and they addressed this gesture of covering up with care and creating this metaphor of second skin of a home that we create for ourselves with saris. And as it was continuing for an entire day, the entire scenario unfolded as people were passing by, as people were coming and picking. And this entire process was never became a spectacle for the neighborhood, because for all of this month, everyone was part of that engagement and everyone was part of what was happening, and it was experienced and lived. Particularly Birbhum, this particular district, everyone knows it by the cultural popularity of Shantiniketan. And Shantiniketan is a really small part of this entire Birbhum. In Birbhum, there is this camouflage scenario of stone mafias, sand mafias, gold minings, and till now, all of these things are totally camouflaged within these scenarios. So as we were unfolding this, through this also we were in a way trying to study the landscape. We were trying to identify the landscape and how it unfolds. This is how it was for 23 days. It was happening at the time of the first Bengal Biennale that took place in 2024 and 2025. And you can see that how the neighborhood is over there. There is space overlapping with each other. Even places are getting always shrinking. Spaces are getting disrupted by larger occupations, and free public spaces are not much now available for everyone to just roam around. So within this scenario, we were at that time, we were also living for that entire duration of 23 days, we were living in that same house. And every morning, from morning 9 till evening 7, the house would be a public space. And after evening 7, we would all go back to like talk, eat, cook, and sleep within the same house. But everything was compromised. Our living, our accessibility of the space, how we breathe, how gradually the entire building was being damp, being moist. All of this was happening at the same time. It was somehow that the landscape was coming within the house. So over here, Surojit is right now unfolding the one of the book that we made of Kanthar Ghar, and this is the structure of the house itself, and within that there are multiple processes of makings. Surojit, would you like to share?
There is a quote from Rabindranath Tagore. In the cooperative system, cunning or seeking special advantage should not make one person trump over another. They should grow together in unity. When this system spread across the world, the terrible rivalry that exists today in the marketplace of livelihood will disappear. And instead, people will become rich. People will become each other's sincere friends and helpers, able to unite in harmony.
So for these 23 days, when Kanthar Ghar took place, we were also having simultaneous parallel initiations that was happening on the site every day. And it engaged our collaborators, us, and also the flying visitors who were there for a very momentary time. And all of this engagement unfolded through workshops, through presentations, through food as presentation, through sharing stories from our mothers, and even to engaging in games of identifying self. And for a temporary timeline, it became a temporary pedagogical site where the learning, making, and sharing happened at the same spot. And we were initiating this collective space where no one was sharing for the other one, everyone was representing themselves. And within this scenario, what we were thinking through our dialogues, through our research, we had shared that inside of the house, and our collaborators, they had said whatever they wanted to register in the public domain, how their daily lives are, what are their regrets, or what is their childhood, how that looked like, and the sense of an ongoing and building autobiography that totally covered up the entire outer side of the house. In institutions, we have this practice where we only talk, we write, we do research, and expect the execution to be done by others, which itself imposes the differences of this class, power, and authority. As previously I mentioned that we were critically trying to look at these equations of community-based practices. We always find that as artists, we are going to the community. It's not the other way around. Communities are not coming to us. So it is our responsibility to also see the process that we are engaging into, and not make community or not make any collaborator as subjects. As I am saying this, what happened through Kantharghar also, it started from our relations of that neighborhood. We also, with our collaborators, we live in the same neighborhood for a few years now. And with their children, we have our daily engagements. So these relational methodologies, it became a form of sharing and caring that continued throughout more than a year now, and it's still going on. Now, Shirojit would read a small piece of letter by Rabindranath.
Tagore writes to Ottenstedt, April 24, 1921, Sourcier, France. When I sent my appeal to Western people for an international institution in India, I made use of the word university. For the sake of convenience, but that word not merely has an inner meaning, but an outer association in the minds of those who use it. And that idea tortures my idea into its own rigid space. It is unfortunate. I should not allow my idea to be pinned to word like a dead butterfly or a foreign museum. It must not be known by its definition, but by its own life growth. I saved my Shantiniketan from being trampled into a smoothness by the steamroller of the education department. It is poor in resources and equipment, but it has a wealth of truth that no money can ever buy. I am proud of the fact that it is not a machine-made article perfectly modeled in a workshop, it is our very own. If we must have a university, it should spring from our life and be sustained by it.
Now, I would like to take up this opportunity to introduce Professor Sanchayan Ghosh. Sanchayan Ghosh is an artist pedagogue and currently an associate professor in Department of Painting Kala Bhavana, Vishwabharati University in Shantiniketan, India. Over the years, Sanchayan has been interested in site-specific art as a process of direct engagement with site, location, and people. He has explored pedagogy as a tool to participate with both public and private institutions and sites. With his early inspirations from community ritual events in Vishwabharati Shantiniketan and his workshop experience with third theatre exponent Badal Sarkar, he explores pedagogy as a reciprocal process of making and learning together in specific community situations through workshops and participatory activities. These led to site-specific interdisciplinary conversations and multi-layered installations and collaborative performances. In recent times, he has explored different institutional spaces as a site-based engagement and generated a pedagogical encounter where research is transformed into a multisensory, interdisciplinary encounter of different forms of interaction. Sanchayan Ghosh has over the years been exploring spaces between institutional and public spaces and succeeded in extending art and performance from institutional spaces to public situations. In his practice, research and pedagogy become a multi-layered method of engaging with different systems of knowledge production and dissemination. Sanchayan, please take over.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you, GABAA, for making me part of this gathering and inviting me to say some things about my practice, which I don't know. It's a much shared practice, so it's not something that totally I cannot say my own practice, but it's a process that I'm exploring with others together. But yeah, I mean, it was heartening to see that you are sharing muri and chai with all the other fellow participants who are part of the Jan Van Eyck Academy this year and also other curators. And thank you all for having me this part of this conversation. But I was also very much intrigued that the food that you're having today, which is muri, it has been one of the tools used by the present political party which won in Bengal to sort of please the popular sentiments of the community. The Prime Minister, which came and had muri in public with and trying to show his solidarity with the commoners and common people. So it's a very political tool, muri, which has become a very political tool in the sense in India at this point. But beyond that, I think where I will just share. It's not a written text or a kind of a very organized talk that I will be doing. I will be following some images, and around that I will try to place my argument in a sense how I look at the institute or the university that Ritushri has just talked about, and what is my role within that space when it has become a central university, a kind of structure which is kind of trying to homogenize the university model all over India within a certain prototype. And what is the idea of periphery in that context? Because if you want to talk about Shantiniketan or Vishwabharati, the university, or the configuration, it is very important to understand the positionality of that in a more historical sense. And then once it is being part of this mainstream central university format, what happens to that methods or tools, and how do we look at it in the present, and how this idea of the periphery becomes more a kind of choice than a position, and then how to sustain a certain idea of periphery within a pedagogical structure, which is so much challenged in the context of university education at this point. So it's a kind of, I will just try to share some of the tools and methods which I have been inspired, but also have been trying to question and also re-engage and discover myself within that system in which itself has transformed into a very fixed and centralized model at this point. So I will just share some images, and through the images I will try to take you through certain ideas and arguments, and then certain process of working also. I think GABAA is also, I think I have been working with them within the institution when they were part of the institution and also outside the institution. So how does these relationships formulate a certain method of practice within the notion of a larger idea of pedagogy? And taking pedagogy beyond this idea of teaching or educating and looking at it as a kind of staying alive together in a certain form of social and cultural time in which we are all cornered in a certain way. If you look at what is cultural production can be termed in contemporary terms. So I will just share some images. Let me just open the. Can you see my
Yes.
projection? Okay. Let's go back. Sorry, it's not a little bit. So there are a lot of images, so I hope I will be able to bring a narrative from a distant land and through online. And so I thought it would be interesting to just go around certain images and talk about these ideas that I'm trying to share today. So it's a kind of it's not a title as such, but it's a kind of a proposition, and I will try to work around this idea of the periphery and what is pedagogy and how it becomes an art practice within a certain institutional framework, and how the idea of the private and the public, encounters in the relation of how to interpret the idea of pedagogy as a tool, and what is a performative approach within that framework as a post-performance phenomena of engaging with institutions and working around institutions. So this is a small map. I think why I use the word periphery, because you can see Calcutta here, where is the main city in West Bengal in the eastern part, and here is Shantiniketan, which is almost 2.5 hours by train, or by road 3 hours. So this is a place where Tagore in early 20th century decides to situate an institute. I mean, that's why I'm starting with a map, just to identify the spatiality of this movement, that he's moving out from the city center and taking the institution to a little bit far off land with this very specific geographical condition. So this is Tagore, and he situates his school, or he starts with a school and then it goes into an idea of an university, world university. So the place is called Shantiniketan, which is his father's land, father's house, basically. The house is called Shantiniketan, who was a mystic and also a landlord. And Tagore inherited that legacy of a feudal lord, but then he gives up all that and starts this institute to create an open and free space for education in general, and then it becomes a kind of a cultural institute and gets adopted by the government. But what is interesting here is that he gives a name called Vishwabharati to the idea of the university, which means world in a nest. So his idea is not necessarily of a university, as you could hear from the text that Surajit read, where he is just borrowing the word university, but his argument is much more fragile than a university, something that is like a nest. So nest is not a very permanent structure. It is something which is being built every season in an annual process where birds come and nest, and then they leave that place and it gets destroyed in the process, and then they again rebuild it. So the argument is more about this kind of a idea of a space which was challenging this whole very institutional, architectonic, single entry, one point view of a Victorian university that we have seen in the colonial era, and its whole architectural framework that defines the idea of how education will be shared as a kind of top-down linear process of understanding history and time and power. So from the beginning, the idea of Vishwabharati is was to host people, to bring people together from all over the world. And this is happening in context of a colonial regime. And he is not proposing a national institute, but he is proposing a world institute. So there is a idea of transgressing the idea of nationalism and trying to look into this larger idea of internationalism, which is core, and he's situating this idea of the internationalism in context of a landscape. So it is very important to understand that how an institution is not an architecture, but it is a situation in a landscape where you are trying to build a certain conversation. So landscape becomes a very central idea within the argument of Tagore's method of questioning the Victorian method of education and its knowledge production. So you can see this is the landscape from where he started, a very barren landscape with nothing around it. And this emptiness is something which he is interested, and he has been constantly trying to build around this, that how to experiment with the model of learning in a landscape condition which is as barren as this context. And these are some of the architectural spaces which comes up in the process. Also, how to articulate this method of pedagogy, both as a spatial conversation and also as a methodological or tools. So I will not go into the history of Shantiniketan, but I will just try to share with you some of the tools that Tagore and his associates were trying to associate or bring together to define this idea of kind of international institution, but also grounded in the context of its location and the landscape. So one of the things that he introduced is the idea of the open air classroom, or learning from nature, directly situating education in the open landscape and responding to the changing day and the time and the space, a kind of a creation of a kind of a forest education methodology. And the idea of the circle has its own relevance in his tool, where he is defining that the teacher is not an outside or a linear frontal phenomena, but a continuity of the circle, that you become part of this larger process of sharing and making together, and you learn and you share, and in the process you build up a certain kind of a conversation with your environment and also with the fellow people with whom you are sitting together. So these are some of the images of the open air classrooms. As you can see, how the space evolves around the natural landscape. But it is interesting to understand that this is also something which is also being built. So in one level, he is not totally rejecting this idea of the Victorian model of going and engaging with nature and trying to build something, this whole outsider relationship with the space, but he is engaging with that tool, but also opening it up as a conversation with the landscape and not an imposition from outside, but how to live together with the landscape and develop a certain pedagogical model. So these are some images of the school. So this is the school that he started first as one of the experiments at how to build up. These are all recent images, but this is how the classrooms will be situated as part of the landscape. The other part of it is how to also create spaces which will resonate these ideas of coming together of multiple traditions, multiple cultures into a certain kind of a conversation. So this is another aspect of the architectural framework which he introduces, where he derives different forms of architectural references like pillars and roof structures or the balcony, or from different traditions, like from Buddhist traditions, from Islamic traditions, from Japanese traditions, and also from the Sri Lankan tradition. So there are a lot of these conversations that he's trying to build up as a kind of a model which will center itself within the Asian context, but then bring the world together into the framework. So these are some of the architectural details that you can see, where the pillars have multiple sources and references. So there is some Islamic references here, and then there are these Buddhist constructions, even certain brackets which are coming from Chinese architecture. And that's how he sort of creates a very eclectic tradition of unfolding this idea of coming together. The other aspect which was very much important within the Shantiniketan practice is collaborative workshop-based model, where they were doing a lot of works together, of painting together, of doing workshops together, kind of a workshop-based model of pedagogy, which is necessarily not a curriculum-based pedagogy, but a more process-driven pedagogy, where you are coming and making things together and working together. And mural becomes one of those practices where students, faculties, everybody would come and join. This is again a ceiling mural by Vinod Bihari Mukherjee, which again reflects the idea very much that there is a pond and everybody comes and takes water from it. So this idea of coming together and being part of this larger phenomena of the world around you and how you coexist in different forms. But the idea of the mural and working as a workshop model is very much core to the practice of Shantiniketan, where you find a lot of these works done by teachers and students together, where faculties come and work with the students as a kind of a workshop model. So this is again a mural by K.G. Subramaniam, which again is something that he repaints after 10 years, and so it was erased and then it was repainted. So this kind of conversational space, a kind of a performative pedagogy that emerged in Shantiniketan as a kind of a working model, that where things are seen not just as a perspective but as a kind of a constant engagement. These are some other works done by some of the other faculties who were very much concerned about the environment and its ecology. So now I will talk a little bit more about this project, which is called the Black House project, which was made in the 1930s, but it was an experiment with indigenous architecture, but also it was an experiment to go beyond the indigenous and how to incorporate the indigenous into conversation of the curriculum of the academic project. So students and faculties, they joined together to make this building. So you are not just also making, but also learning how indigenous architectural process works and how a certain functional, livable space can be constructed within that context. And so Black House is a very interesting example, which really sort of grounds the idea of the pedagogical model of Shantiniketan, that how there is a kind of a constant conversation and making and learning together. So these are all cross-reference of archival references, which were then reenacted as a relief or a sculptural form around this mud house, which is not following the idea of a mud house, but more as three rectangles which is moving in a diagonal direction. So there is a kind of a futuristic idea of a house, but also it is made with mud and the traditional knowledge of how to make a mud house. So this encounter of this very futuristic idea of architecture, but also with the indigenous knowledge and technique, is something what Shantiniketan, I think, was situating in the larger discourse in its early days. And also, I think the other part of it is this performative campus, how to activate the campus into a certain discursive space. So faculties and artists who are teaching there or working together, they're incorporating different ideas of bodies. What kind of bodies will be introduced in the campus? I mean, these are sculptures by Ramkinkar Bej, which brings in a kind of representation of the indigenous community that living outside the campus, but in a very performative mode, shifting mode, in a kind of a migratory mode. So constantly reminding the space within the campus that it's a shift, a kind of a movement in space that the institute is trying to practice as a model of education. So this is a small quote by K.R. Shivakumar, who writes that that modernism in Shantiniketan was not a style nor a form of internationalism, but it is a kind of a critical re-engagement with foundational aspects of art, necessitated by chances in one's unique historical position. So there is a kind of a situating practice as a pedagogical model of making and learning within a certain historicity and a certain context. Now I'll just share you some briefly about the idea of the institute, the Fine Arts Institute that started. So you can see it's a kind of a structure which was modeled in a kind of circularity. So this is the center of the campus, and then we have these different studios which work around it. And again, certain very important architectural experiments that is happening, which would look at question the idea of display, the question the idea of workshop, question the idea of making in a certain form. And this is Chatal, which is a very important site within the campus where this kind of a horizontal knowledge of coming together and meeting together, and the campus and all the departments are around this thing. But now, one thing we have to understand that when we are talking about Shantiniketan today, it is also an institution that is structured by the central government and not something that is an independent experimental phenomena which was started by Tagore in early 20th century. So how do we, so I will just go very fast to this campus and come to the, so this is some of the present studio situations. So within that context, I mean, I want to also refer to some of the other tools which were introduced as an anti-colonial model, which is about looking at leather batik, which comes from Java, Sumatra, and it was explored in that space, and dance and performances are also very integral part of the curriculum. This is one of the earliest woman artists, Gauri Bhanjo, who was very much active in bringing all these different so-called lesser-known forms of practices into the curriculum of the visual art things, then bringing batik, which is a kind of resist dye method that came from Java to Shantiniketan, and it became a tool for the school to explore different forms of expressions. So I will. So the first part which I wanted to talk about, I will end with this session is. This is a kind of a particular floor drawing technique which was introduced in Shantiniketan, inspired from the local ritual traditions where women from the villages will draw these floor drawings to initiate any kind of activity, whether it is religious or farming or any kind of form. So Shantiniketan adopted this method and transformed it into a kind of a method of working together, how drawing can become a kind of a collective shared space of making mark on the floor to initiate a process, to initiate a certain process of activity. So you can see there's a lot of this. So one of the other thing which I think as a site Shantiniketan was trying to do is to respond to the changing seasons and the weathers, and how to respond the changing seasons through certain specific actions and specific activity, and it becomes a kind of a circular, continuous process of sustaining those methods as an integrated, holistic idea of pedagogy. So tree planting and this kind of gatherings will become an important event for the campus to come together and to make things around it. So this is one of the sessions where Tagore would also be present, but what I would like to specifically talk about is this idea of tree planting festival, which is called the Vriksharopan Festival. And you have seen the first picture, which had no trees, almost like only one or two palm trees in the open landscape. And this whole landscape was being built together with the students and the faculties, and tree planting became a very regular event. And that was transformed into a kind of a community meeting point. So this kind of central space of the floor will be made where a tree will be planted, and students would create this kind of floral ornaments and design a palanquin where a small sapling will be placed, and then there will be a procession, and there will be singing and walking through that space to take the tree and plant it. Now, this brings me to this whole context of what are the parallel ideas of practices which were being instituted. So one of the important practice that is still in vogue in Shantiniketan is the idea of walking and singing, or walking and reaching somewhere together, like a procession. So the idea of, or dancing and moving together. So this kind of a very bodily, physical engagement with the site, with the location and the space, I think becomes a very important and core idea of what Shantiniketan pedagogy is, and which I am trying to place as this performative pedagogy, which is a constant conversational mode in a multisensory way. So this is the tree planting session, which now at this point has become a very public festival, and it becomes a cultural icon for the Bengali community, and it has been replicated all over Bengal as one of these cultural events of planting tree together. So this is the point where I'm also trying to bring in that what happens to an institutional idea, which is a peripheral idea, which is trying to question certain majoritarian idea of practices, itself becomes a system of power. Itself becomes a system of trying to impose its cultural legacy as a larger form of Bengali culture in that sense. So what happens to an institution like Shantiniketan when it gets adopted by the central government and becomes a tool of the government to reflect its power through the central government institution? And what does it bring into people like us who want to engage with the institute? How do you negotiate within that? What happens to that peripheral value, and how do we sustain a certain peripheral position within this majoritarian form which is engaging? One way is to reject the institute, that okay, this is now a central government institute, and leave the institute. But what are the other options there to sustain a certain idea of periphery within these forms of practices? So how can we engage with this holistic education within the university format? What are the different ways we can intervene? And how can we reconfigure the institutional space as a site of cultural encounter? Because one of the possibilities that happens for this institute to become a central government institute is that people from all over India, different caste, different community, are coming to study. So how do we create a space for those kind of encounters to become more and more active within the university model? And the other thing is to how to reclaim a certain idea of periphery, which I personally believe is a system which needs to be sustained, because institutions will constantly appropriate a certain method of functioning and try to bureaucratize it and make it into a system. So how do we sustain the idea of a peripheral position of pedagogy within our institutional framework? So I'll just try to share some small projects that I have been trying to work together with the students community, which for me is a kind of a changing community, a kind of a temporal community. And for me, institution that way becomes a very active space of cultural encounters, and to constantly reorganize and find ways to find gaps within that spaces of the curriculum, which is a kind of a very fixed curriculum, and how do we create new spaces of communication within that space. So one of the work that as a beginner, when I joined the institute, I thought that how can I engage with this idea of the study, which is a kind of a very core framework of the colonial institution, that you study, analyze, and then create conclusions. Then how can we re-engage with the idea of the study and make it a kind of a meeting point for this kind of cultural encounters? So this was a 10-year-long process where I was inviting the final year students to come and sit together, and we were exploring this idea of the silk screen. It was a silk screen workshop, and we found that the screen is a temporal body which can be there, but it is also erased because it is washed off. So how this absence could also become a method of documenting and creating conversation. So these are moments where students would come and sit in front of a photosensitive screen and talk about their ideas of studying in the institute, what they think of the future institute, and how they're imagining the world outside. So it was a kind of a 10-year process, which I was trying to sustain through every final year batch who were passing out from the institute, and trying to create this very specific conversation. So this is again another conversations where this group will stand together in front of these photosensitive screens, and for half an hour they will be talking, and in the process their shadows will be exposed. And that becomes a kind of erased, absent space, but also the conversation gets documented, and then it was finally, this whole process was shared as a kind of a large installation with the students coming back. Some of these alumni who have left the institute again came back to the institute to further generate certain conversations around these ideas of what is the institution could be. The other process which I have been interested is that how to create more informal gatherings and informal spaces within the institutional space where things are happening not as a extracurricular activity but as a very informal way of intervening with the idea of how the institute exists. So this is again one such sessions where with some students in 2006 we formed a society called the Monogabet Society, which is a kind of a Fools Club. But the idea was to do more serious work through Fools mask, or maybe as a kind of a positioning that we are all fools doing these interventions. So the tree planting thing that you saw, I showed you earlier, it is almost 100 years now that this institute has been planting trees. So on 2007, we made a research, okay, where are those trees being planted and what are the states of those trees with the students. And we, from the university magazines, and we made a revisit to all the magazines and mapped all the. So this was a letter which was issued on 1st of August, which is a GABAA day, which anybody in the world can celebrate. That we will be assembling in front of the campus to search for these trees. So it's a kind of a method of revisiting the idea of expedition and looking for trees and looking through the kind of understanding the landscape. And so faculties and students, they joined in the process. So it was quite, so this Monogabet Society became a kind of this invisible society which would pop up in August every year as a kind of doing different activities. So there was a map which was initiated, and this was the kind of research that we did, that where are the trees. So we individually tried to spot the trees. And then on 1st of August, this procession started with all the placards and the names of all the trees written in it, and we were searching for the trees in the campus. So it became a kind of a very, for others, for the passerbys, the public, because the campus of Shantiniketan is also very porous. I mean, it's very public in nature. There are people, the residents are also moving around it, and we are, as students and faculties, are also part of that network. So it's always a gaze within which you are functioning, I mean, which is the between the academic and the public gaze. So this whole procession became a kind of a method where we were searching for some past legacy which is lost or which is still continuing, but what is the relevance of that? So Shamuli Khastogir, one of the environment activists, she joined us in that expedition, and she located the place in 1950 where her father planted a tree as one of the person who initiated it. So it was a kind of a learning and also experiencing new spaces. And through this process, we were also encountering how the campus has changed, how the landscape, which has been occupied as an institutional space within that free, open landscape, how in the course of the last 80 years, 100 years, the landscape of the campus and the spaces around it has also changed. And in many places, we could not find the trees, and so we wrote missing and we kept it there. And in some places, we found them. And so there was waiting, there was this tracing, and then there was this trying to locate trees. And then we had some faculties from botany department and other science departments who were making us identify the trees, what are the different trees that are there. But at the end of the day, after 3 days, we found that some of the trees are really missing, they're not there. And that became a kind of a provocation for the university also, because why these trees are missing? I mean, it could be because of storm or some other purpose, but we kept those placards in the fence, and it was then taken over. Yeah. So I will just end up with another project which we have done together. So This is another work which I wanted to share. This kind of a reading process, which became part of a kind of reading through some of the feminist texts, a kind of a performance-based process where I was doing these workshop-based methods where 9 girls students, they joined and they made their own research on this notion of the woman they aspire in their own life and what are the different texts where women are the protagonist in historical sense. And then in the library of Kala Bhavan, we sort of made a reading performance for 8 days. We created this Shamiana, which is a kind of a Platonic polyhedron, and within that, the students, they wrote about the woman they aspire in their life, and also we created this kind of a reading space, which was more about reading these different texts together. And the idea was that these texts were being read simultaneously. So if the viewer has to listen to these performances, they have to come and sit together and listen to the text. But this was instituted in the library space, which is part of the campus main focus, where students come and read and go to the library also. So it happened for 8 days, and in the process, the students, they read and expanded this lycra material, which was a kind of a Second World War material, which we were trying to use as a way to deconstruct the body and the idea of reading. Yeah, so these are through my practice the last 20 years, I think. So this went into another university in JNU, where the students from JNU, they joined in as a reading performance, who were living in Delhi. And finally, it also went into a biennale, where I was invited and I said, I want the students group to come and perform. So this kind of conversation and collaboration is something that I'm interested with, that how a pedagogical framework doesn't get limited within the classroom education or in the curriculum, but becomes a kind of a possibility for taking practice beyond the institutional space, encounter with the public situations, and have a conversation. Okay, I will end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanchayan, for sharing your thoughts with us.
শোনা যাচ্ছে? আমাদের কথা শোনা যাচ্ছে? হ্যালো?
সঞ্চয়ন, শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যালো? আমাদের কথা শুনতে পাচ্ছেন? হ্যালো?
Shall I unshare? Yeah.
ওকে। শুনতে পাচ্ছেন আপনি আমাদের কথা? হ্যালো?
হ্যালো? হ্যালো?
Thank you.
Yeah, I will continue. So now, as you see, you have few clothes in front of you, few pieces of white cloth, and we will be also sharing with you some beeswax, few brushes, and as Sanchanda rightly mentioned about batik coming to India from Java, Japanese batik, and Rabindranath, how incorporated that within the school of Shantiniketan. So here we request all of you to explore this as a free space to write, to draw, or to do some actions however you feel. And when you put the brush and use the wax to paint or something, afterwards the wax will dry out, and when later we dye it, whatever you have written, that will act as a resistance of your voice, and that will remain colorless. So whatever you want to.
All of us has to share the wax and the process.
Yes, we have few bowls of wax, so it will be really nice if you all can share.
cardboard buildings where the workers do not pass.
And we would also like to request you to unfold these tongas, and within this you will see some historical events, some protests that took place, along with few ideas and few questions that we have for all of you. And you're free to take it home and think further with the questions. And when you open this, on one side where there are these like small writings but so congested, there is a faint map which is made through the protests that is mentioned, a map of India. And we will be reading out about those protests. Some will be in Bengali script and Bengali language. So please feel free to go through these events. We will mention the year of the event so you can have a connection to it and see it for yourself. Yeah, the wax is hot, so be careful of that. And yeah, we are also sharing small cardboard pieces that you can put it under. It's also a space to like reflect upon what you all have been thinking about the entire symposium as a whole for these past 2 days. Today is the last day of the symposium. So whatever you have felt regarding this idea of institutioning, or what institutioning is, or how this idea of sustainable and inclusive European art institution occur to you, please go ahead and explore this space. And before we... Yes? Yes.
I don't know, what's the relationship between our thoughts on institutions instituting and this?
So all of the historical events that are shared within this pamphlet that you can take home, these are some forms of and instances of undercommons that we are understanding, which at those times when these protests took place acted as a structure that was functioning without the dominant power at that time, and that we are understanding as a structure which is for learning and sharing, but in a more collective way, and can be little forms of undercommons that we are trying to pose, as it is also a few parts are discussed in the Undercommons book. So for that reference, we are sharing with you the histories that we come from, and the histories that are sometimes avoided or not included in European educational structures. So please feel free to read it. You need one?
Was there any question somebody was asking? Sorry, I had to go.
Okay. If anyone has any questions for Professor Ghosh, I think not at the moment. Sanchayan, আপনি কি মানে এখন থাকতে পারবেন বাকি কলটা, না আপনি অফ করবেন? আমি বলছি আপনি কি বাকি কলটা থাকতে পারবেন, না আপনাকে যেতে হবে? 25 to 30 minutes.
No, so if you want to have a conversation, I can come back in another 15 minutes.
Yes, yes, that works.
Or you tell me.
Yeah, that works. Just আপনি ভিডিও কলটা কাটবেন না, জাস্ট মিউট করে ভিডিও অফ করে, আপনি মিউট করে ভিডিও অফ করে রাখতে পারেন। ওকে। সঞ্চয়ন দা একটা কোশ্চেন। হ্যাঁ,
Thank you very much for the presentation. I just wanted to know how was that part of the public curriculum?
Totally pixelated, so I can't see anything.
Yeah, I'm a bit far from the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
we'll
one
show
minute.
you. Na, ঠিক আছে. Yeah.
So yeah,
now it's better. Yeah.
I just wanted to understand. Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to understand a bit what was the relation, or how was the different activity that you did with the students within the context of the university took place in the curriculum. How was that kind of, how do you say it, evaluate?
Okay, so if I could hear you correctly, that's how it was evaluated in a sense. You're asking how this process was part of. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was that evaluated?
No,
Yeah.
I mean, one thing is that when I introduce in my, like there are two layers to it. One is that these activities which I have shown are mostly outside the curriculum. I mean, so I invite students to come and engage in different kinds of contents and contexts. So it's more of kind of a free space for them to come and explore that. So these projects do not really get evaluated. I mean, it is more their participation, that whether they would like to be part of a process like this and work together to understand and explore some methods or ways of understanding certain ideas, like that. And there are certain things which are, so it's a kind of a little bit, for me, it's a more beyond the curriculum activity where I'm also working. So that's what I call as more as a practice where I'm not just limiting it to the institutional time, but the larger way of living and lifestyle becomes part of the institutional process. But yeah, I mean, in my curriculum, in the sense when it is inside the studio and I'm doing some other activities with them, I often tend to push this idea of evaluating, in a sense that, you know, because it's a collective thing and you are making and learning from each other and the failures becomes your methods of learning. So there are other faculties who would give evaluations for individual, who is better than whom. And here is this process where I could create a collective math situation that, okay, if all of you work together, it succeeds. If all of you do not work together, it doesn't succeed. So the idea of evaluation, I try to make it more from the point of view that whether the group has been able to work together or not. So it is about that mutual respect to each other's contribution, you know, that if I do not work, okay, that part will not be completed. So how can we work and come together? So within the curriculum, I try to push this idea most of the time that there is no one gradation of things, but mostly if the whole group, whether you have been able to succeed the process in a certain direction and take a certain, you know, perception of it, which collectively comes out. Yeah.
Good.
So this becomes like one of those sessions within the curriculum where you are not competing with each other, but rather trying to help each other to create that possibility that, okay, we have to come together to finally see it through into certain direction where individual ideas are there, but also how these individual ideas would come together to work together and, you know, space them together within that framework. So yeah, so it's more about generating that idea of collective working that I often push within the curriculum, that how we can develop this idea of working together in a certain way.
Thank you. I'm asking because it's also something I try to push with my students.
Right.
And most of the time it's a bit complicated in this context because some students says that they would like to be great individually and therefore they expect to have a 20 on 20, for example. Because after they have to face a society where the great counts somehow. We defend the idea of going out of that context of grade and go a bit beyond it or dismantling it. But still,
I fully understand. I mean,
it's a conversation.
Your concern and also this trap in which we are all were trying to sort of create a certain kind of competitiveness and in terms of trying to evaluate, which are part of the larger system. But yeah, I mean, within that, I sometimes try to bring these ideas of working together where it's not about individual evaluation, but as a group, how can we evaluate, how can we sort of work towards something that is not possible for one individual to do. So I create those kind of situations that, okay, this work will not be completed without many of your participation. Yeah.
Thank you.
But of course it is there. I mean, that's where I think Tagore's idea also, he himself said that what I wanted to do as a framework didn't succeed. After 20 years of his first 20 years of his school, he was also a little disillusioned with this idea of these competitive exams and again coming back into this whole evaluation and then going into all that framework. But yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a system in which we are all trapped. But yeah, I mean, you have to find these moments where it just goes beyond that.
Thank you, Sanchayan.
Thank you, Sanchayan.
Thank you.
Rabil,
Thank you, all of you, for listening to me and so patiently. And enjoy the resist drawing. Bye. Okay. Bye, Amshu. Good to see you after some time. Oida, have a nice time.
আমি কি ভাষায় কথা বলছি হয়তো তোমরা জানো না, তাতে কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। আমি কি বলতে চাইছি সেটা হয়তো তোমরা বুঝতে পারছো না, তাতেও কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। কিন্তু জানার চেষ্টাও নেই, তাতে কিছু প্রশ্ন আর সমস্যা তৈরি হয়। জানতে হলে আমি একটু সহজ করে দিই। জানতে হবে আমরা কোথা থেকে এসেছি, ভারতের কোন অংশ থেকে এসেছি ভারতের। তারপরে জ্যানভ্যানাইক বা গাবার আর্কাইভ থেকে এই আজকের ভিডিওটা খুঁজে বের করতে হবে। তারপরে ভিডিও থেকে অডিও ফাইলকে আলাদা করতে হবে। গুগলে গিয়ে অডিও থেকে স্ক্রিপ্ট তৈরি করতে হবে এবং অনুবাদ করতে হবে। এই সব যদি করে সে জানতে পারবে সে যে পরিশ্রমটা করেছে তার প্রসেসই আমি বলেছি।
If you're curious or interested to know what Rabiul had just said, you yourself have to find a way to understand it, and if you are able to do so, then you will know how a language can be decolonized. So you can go to Zenvanaik's archive or GABAA's archive to look beyond.
In 1899, Rudyard Kipling called it the white man's burden to civilize the non-European world. More than a century later, the burden has shifted. It is now our burden to unfold the memories of colonialism, reclaim our histories, and narrate our own journey of our own voice. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. George Sand. You also need to follow the template.
Yes, so now we will read out the years in English so everyone can connect to the histories that we are talking about. Rabiul, if you can start.
If you refer to the pamphlet that you've been given, you can follow the events through the year.
1600 রানী এলিজাবেথ প্রথম ব্রিটিশ ইস্ট ইন্ডিয়া কোম্পানিকে রয়্যাল চার্টার প্রদান করেন। ইংরেজ ব্যবসায়ীদের দ্বারা সংগঠিত এই কোম্পানি এশিয়ার সঙ্গে বাণিজ্যের একচেটিয়া অধিকার লাভ করে। প্রথম দিকে তারা মশলা, রেশম ও তুলোর ব্যবসা করলেও পরে সামরিক শক্তি ও রাজনৈতিক জোটের মাধ্যমে ধীরে ধীরে ভারতের ব্রিটিশ ও উপনিবেশ শাসনের ভিত্তি স্থাপন করেন। সুরাত আগমন 1608 ক্যাপ্টেন উইলিয়াম হকিন্স ইস্ট ইন্ডিয়া কোম্পানির প্রতিনিধি হিসাবে সুরাতে আসেন। তখন সুরাত ছিল জাহাঙ্গীর অধীনে একটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ মুঘল বন্দর। সুরাত যুদ্ধের পর্তুগিজদের পরাজয়ের পর 1613 সালে ইংরেজরা সুরাতের কারখানা স্থাপন অনুমতি পায়। এর মাধ্যমে ভারতে ব্রিটিশদের স্থায়ী বাণিজ্যিক কার্যক্রম শুরু হয়।
1668 বোম্বে হস্তান্তর বম্বে ব্রিটিশ ক্রাউনের কাছ থেকে ইস্ট ইন্ডিয়া কোম্পানির হাতে হস্তান্তর করা হয়। পর্তুগালের রাজকুমারী ক্যাথরিন অফ ব্রাগাঞ্জার সঙ্গে দ্বিতীয় চার্লসের বিবাহ চুক্তির মাধ্যমে ইংল্যান্ড বোম্বে লাভ করেছিল। পরে কোম্পানি এটিকে একটি বড় বন্দর, নৌঘাঁটি ও বাণিজ্যিক কেন্দ্রে পরিণত করে। 1690 কলকাতার ভিত্তি স্থাপন, ফাউন্ডেশন অফ ক্যালকাটা। জব চার্নক সুতানুটি গোবিন্দপুর ও কলিকাতা গ্রাম একত্র করে কলকাতার ভিত্তি স্থাপন করে। পরে সেখানে ফোর্ট উইলিয়াম নির্মিত হয়। কলকাতা পূর্ব ভারতে ব্রিটিশ প্রশাসন ও বাণিজ্যের প্রধান কেন্দ্র হয়ে ওঠে এবং পরবর্তীতে ব্রিটিশ ভারতের রাজধানী হয়। 1757 পলাশীর যুদ্ধ। পলাশীর যুদ্ধ হয় রবার্ট ক্লাইভের নেতৃত্বাধীনে ইস্ট ইন্ডিয়া কোম্পানি ও বাংলার নবাব সিরাজউদ্দৌলার মধ্যে। মির্জাফরের বিশ্বাসঘাতকতা ব্রিটিশদের জয় নিশ্চিত করে। এই বিজয়ের ফলে কোম্পানি বাংলার বিপুল সম্পদের ওপর নিয়ন্ত্রণ পায় এবং ব্রিটিশ রাজনৈতিক আধিপত্যের সূচনা ঘটে। যেগুলো কাটা আছে ওগুলো আর দরকার নেই।
1764 বক্সারের যুদ্ধ। সানসেট ক্রস 1793।
জোরে।
1798 সাবসিডিয়ারি অ্যালায়েন্স। 1831 থেকে 1832 কোল বিদ্রোহ। 1831 to 32 ছোটনাগপুর অঞ্চলে ব্রিটিশ নীতি জমিদার ও মহাজনদের বিরুদ্ধে কোল বিদ্রোহ সংগঠিত হয়। মুন্ডা, ওরাও ও হোসো বিভিন্ন উপজাতি জনগোষ্ঠী শুধু ভগতের মতো নেতাদের নেতৃত্বে বিদ্রোহ অংশ নেয়। ব্রিটিশরা কঠোরভাবে বিদ্রোহ দমন করলেও এটি ছিল ঔপনিবেশিক শোষণের বিরুদ্ধে অন্যতম প্রাচীন উপজাতীয় প্রতিরোধ। The Englishmen carries an axe like a sponge, drawing up riches from the banks of the Ganges and squeezing them down upon the banks of the Thames. এরপর 1848 1848 ডক্ট্রিন অফ ল্যাপস।
সন্ন্যাসী ফকির 1763। 1855 to 1856 সাঁওতাল বিদ্রোহের নেতৃত্বে সিধু এবং কানু মুর্মু। ব্রিটিশ শাসন ও জমিদার ও মহাজনদের অত্যাচারের বিরুদ্ধে এক বড় আন্দোলন গড়ে ওঠে। অতিরিক্ত কর, জমি দখল ও শোষণের কারণে সাঁওতালদের রেলপথ, থানাসহ সরকারি স্থাপত্য আক্রমণ চালায়। ব্রিটিশরা বিদ্রোহে দমন করলেও এটি ভবিষ্যতে উপজাতির আন্দোলনে একটা অনুপ্রাণিত করে তোলে।
পার কর ডিরেক্ট যেখানে গানে আসছে সেখানে দিয়ে।
দ্বিতীয় ইস্ট ইন্ডিয়া কোম্পানি বিরুদ্ধে শুরু হয় সামরিক বৈষম্য, অর্থনৈতিক শোষণ এবং এনফিল্ড কার্তুজ,
গরু ও
শুয়োর চর্বি ব্যবহারের অভিযোগে কেন্দ্র করে মঙ্গলবান্ডের রানী লক্ষ্মীবাই, বাহাদুর শাহ জফর ও জাতীয় মাধ্যমে নেতারা এই বিরুদ্ধে গুরুত্বপূর্ণ ভূমিকা পালন করে। যদিও বিদ্রোহ দমন করা হয়, এর ফলে ভারতের কোম্পানি শাসনের
অবসান ঘটে। ইন্ডিয়ান ন্যাশনাল কংগ্রেস। হিউম ইন্ডিয়ান ন্যাশনাল কংগ্রেস প্রতিষ্ঠা করে। বোম্বেতে অনুষ্ঠিত প্রথম অধিবেশনের সভাপতি ছিলেন ডব্লিউ.সি. ব্যানার্জি। প্রথম দিকে কংগ্রেস সাংবিধানিক সংস্কার ও প্রশাসনের ভারতীয়দের অংশগ্রহণ দাবি করলেও পরে মহাত্মা গান্ধী নেতৃত্বে এটি স্বাধীনতা আন্দোলনের প্রধান সংগঠনে পরিণত হয়। ব্যাস। 1905 বঙ্গভঙ্গ। লর্ড কার্জন বঙ্গভঙ্গ কার্যকর করেন। বাংলাকে পূর্ববঙ্গ ও আসাম এবং পশ্চিমবঙ্গে বিভক্ত করা হয়। ভারতীয়রা এটিকে ভাগ করো ও শাসন করো নীতি হিসেবে দেখেছিল, ডিভাইড অ্যান্ড রুল। এর বিরুদ্ধে স্বদেশী ও বয়কট আন্দোলন শুরু হয় এবং ভারতীয় জাতীয়তাবাদ আরও শক্তিশালী হয়। অবশেষে 1911 এই সিদ্ধান্ত বাতিল করা হয়।
1905 to 1908 স্বদেশী আন্দোলন। হোয়াট বেঙ্গল থিংস টুডে, ইন্ডিয়া থিংস টুমোরো, গোপাল কৃষ্ণ গোলকে। সং মাই ব্লড মোটাকো। 1905 বঙ্গভঙ্গের প্রতিবাদে স্বদেশী আন্দোলন শুরু হয়। ভারতীয়রা ব্রিটিশ পণ্য বর্জন করে, দেশীয় পণ্য, শিল্প, শিক্ষাকে উৎসাহ করে। বাল গঙ্গাধর তিলক, বিপিনচন্দ্র পাল, অরবিন্দ ঘোষ এই আন্দোলনকে সারা দেশে ছড়িয়ে দেয়। এটি ভারতের অন্যতম একটা গণভিত্তিক জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলন। স্বরাজ ইজ মাই বার্থ রাইট অ্যান্ড আই সেল হ্যাভ ইট, বাল গঙ্গাধর তিলক। 1908 ক্ষুদিরাম বসু। ক্ষুদিরাম বসু প্রফুল্ল চাকি ব্রিটিশ বিচারক জর্জ কেলভিন হত্যার উদ্দেশ্যে মুজফ্ফরপুর বোমা নিক্ষেপ করেন। ভুলবশত 2 ব্রিটিশ মহিলাকে নিহত করেন। প্রফুল্ল আত্মহত্যা করেন এবং ক্ষুদিরাম গ্রেফতার করেন।
তার আত্মত্যাগী
বিপ্লবী জাতীয়তাবাদীকে অনুপ্রাণিত করে। মুসলিম লীগ প্রতিষ্ঠা।
1906
ঢাকায় আগা খান ও নবাব সিরাজউদ্দৌলা মুসলিম নেতার অল ইন্ডিয়া মুসলিম লীগ প্রতিষ্ঠা করে।
সংগঠনটির উদ্দেশ্য ছিল মুসলিম রাজনৈতিক স্বার্থ রক্ষা করা। পরে মোহাম্মদ আলী জিন্নাহর নেতৃত্বে লীগ পৃথক মুসলিম রাষ্ট্রের দাবি তোলে, যা পরবর্তীকালে পাকিস্তান সৃষ্টির পথ তৈরি করে দেয়।
1917 চম্পারণ সত্যাগ্রহ। চম্পারণ সত্যাগ্রহ ছিল ভারতে গান্ধীর
প্রথম বড় আন্দোলন। বিহারে কৃষকদের জোরপূর্বক নীল চাষ করানোর বিরুদ্ধে এই আন্দোলন গড়ে ওঠে।
রাজকুমার শুক্লার সহায়তায় গান্ধী অহিংস প্রতিরোধের মাধ্যমে কৃষকদের শোষণের বিষয়টি তুলে ধরেন।
পরে ব্রিটিশ সরকার কৃষকদের কিছু দাবি মেনে নিতে বাধ্য হয়।
Jallianwala Bagh massacre 1919. On 13 April 1919, British officer General Dyer ordered troops to fire on an unarmed gathering at Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar. Thousands were killed during protests against the Rowlatt Act. The massacre shocked India, intensified nationalism, and led Rabindranath Tagore to renown and give back his British knighthood in protest. सरफरोशी की तमन्ना अब हमारे दिल में है, बिस्मिल आजम का।
1920-22 জালিয়ানওয়ালা হত্যাকাণ্ডের খেলাফত ইস্যুর প্রতিবাদে মহাত্মা গান্ধী অসহযোগ আন্দোলন শুরু করে। ভারতীয়রা স্কুল, আদালত, সরকারি দপ্তর, সরকারি উপাধি, বিদেশি পণ্য বর্জন করেন। তবে 1922 সালে চৌরিচৌরা ঘটনার সহিংসতা এই আন্দোলন স্থগিত করতে হবে গান্ধীকে। সাইমন কমিশন বয়কট 1927। সাইমন গো ব্যাক, লালা লাজপত রায়। 1927 গঠিত সাইমন কমিশনের কোনো ভারতীয় সদস্য না থাকায় সারা দেশে সাইমন গো ব্যাক স্লোগানের প্রতিবাদ শুরু হয়। লাহোর আন্দোলনের সময় লালা লাজপত রায় পুলিশ লাঠিচার্জে গুরুতর আহত হয় এবং পরে মারাও যান। এই আন্দোলনে জাতীয়তাবাদী ঐক্যকে একটা শক্তিশালী রূপ দেয়।
1929 ভগৎ সিং ও বটুকেশ্বর দত্ত ব্রিটিশ দমনমূলক আইনের প্রতিবাদে কেন্দ্রীয় আইনসভায় স্বল্প ক্ষমতার বোমা নিক্ষেপ করেন। তার বিপ্লবী স্লোগান দিয়ে স্বেচ্ছায় আত্মসমর্পণ করেন। কারাগারে ভগৎ সিং রাজনৈতিক বন্দীদের সম অধিকারের দাবিতে অনশন করেন।
ইনকলাব জিন্দাবাদ, ভগৎ সিং।
1930 সল্ট সত্যাগ্রহ।
Salt Satyagraha began in 1930 when Mahatma Gandhi marched to
Samarwati Ashram
to Dundee to protest.
British salt tax.
Gandhi broke the salt law by making
Salt from
the
seawater.
The movement spread nationwide through boycott, protest, and civil
disobedience,
becoming symbol of non-violent resistance.
1930 Quit India movement. The Quit India movement was launched by Mahatma Gandhi in 1942 during World War II. After the failure of the Cripps mission, Gandhi gave the slogan "Do or Die." Protest, strike, and the anti-British activists spread across India. Through brutally suppressed, the movement showed British rule could not continue identically.
1932 পাহাড়তলি ইউরোপিয়ান ক্লাব আক্রমণ। ডগস অ্যান্ড ইন্ডিয়ানস নট অ্যালাউড। 1932 প্রীতিলতা ওয়াদ্দেদারের নেতৃত্বে চট্টগ্রামের পাহাড়তলি ইউরোপিয়ান ক্লাবে আক্রমণ চালানো হয়। ক্লাবটি ব্রিটিশ বর্ণবৈষম্যের প্রতীক হিসেবে পরিচিত ছিল। আক্রমণের পর গ্রেপ্তার এড়াতে প্রীতিলতা সাইনাইড সেবন করে আত্মাহুতি দেন। তিনি বাংলার অন্যতম শ্রেষ্ঠ নারী বিপ্লবী শহীদ হিসেবে স্মরণীয়। 1942 মাতঙ্গিনী হাজরা। 1946 রয়্যাল ইন্ডিয়ান নেভি ডিরেক্ট অ্যাকশন ডে। 1947 ইন্ডিয়ান ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্স অ্যাক্ট। 15th August 1947
প্রায় 2 দশক
independence
ধরে
of
ব্রিটিশ
India.
শাসনের অবসান ঘটিয়ে ভারত স্বাধীনতা লাভ করে। জওহরলাল নেহেরু ভারতের প্রথম প্রধানমন্ত্রী হন
এবং তার ঐতিহাসিক ট্রিস্ট উইথ ডেস্টিনি ভাষণ প্রদান করেন। তবে স্বাধীনতার সঙ্গে দেশভাগ, দাঙ্গা ও মানবিক বিপর্যয় জড়িয়েছিল। At the strike of midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. Jawaharlal Nehru.
1967 পশ্চিমবঙ্গের নকশালবাড়ি জমিদার বিরুদ্ধে কৃষক আন্দোলন শুরু হয়। চারু মজুমদার, কানু সান্যাল এবং জঙ্গলে সাঁওতালদের মতো নেতারা এই গুরুত্বপূর্ণ ভূমিকা পালন করেন। মাওবাদী আদর্শ অনুপ্রেরণা এই আন্দোলনের পরে ভারতের বিভিন্ন অঞ্চলে ছড়িয়ে পড়ে। আমার বাড়ি, তোমার বাড়ি, সবার বাড়ি, নকশাল বাড়ি।
1979 to 85 Assam movement. The Assam movement from 1979 to 1985 protest against illegal, so-called illegal immigrants from Bangladesh, led by ASU and AAGSP. The allegations included strike, boycotts, and demonstration. Violence occurred during the movement, including the Nil massacre. It ended with the Assam Accord of 1985, fixing 24 March 1971 as the cut-off date.
2000 to 2016 protest against AFSPA in Manipur. 2019 to 2020 Shahin Bagh protests, as part of which I read a few lines at the beginning in auditorium in voice of Amir Aziz. Sound? Yes.
1930.
Yeah.
From what I learned, it was not just Gandhi, there was also Sarabina Naidu, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And many others.
Yes. It was
led by Gandhi.
As a front.
Yeah.
But you also choose just to point Gandhi.
No, it's the fact that all the things are over here. These are the algorithm that we are getting once we are in Europe, and this is not same thing that we have when we search it in India. So what you are getting is a particularly version which is curated how algorithm wants people in Europe to see or learn about the history that belongs to us.
Why did you change it then? Why didn't you do us?
Because it is something that you have to take the initiative to do it forward. That's why we have mentioned all of this, and yeah. Yes.
That's a conspiracy.
Yes. Yes, please.
But I'm interested because I was asking a similar question, but usual, let's say, I don't know if there is a usual way of doing, but how do you write these chronologies? So how do you decide which dates, who are the actors, who to emphasize, sort of, how do you do it in your practice? Do you always use the local algorithm? Do you discuss that? Do you use certain books?
উনি বলছেন যে কিভাবে তোমরা সিদ্ধান্ত নিচ্ছ যে কোন সালগুলো তোমরা চুজ করছো বা তাদের মধ্যে কাদেরকে প্রাধান্য দিচ্ছ সেটা চুজ করছো, বা এটা কি তোমরা সবসময় এরকমভাবেই করে থাকো যে তোমরা লোকাল অ্যালগোরিদম ফলো করছো, বা কি ধরনের পদ্ধতির মধ্যে দিয়ে এই ডিসিশন মেকিংটা যে কোনগুলো আমরা বাইরে নিয়ে আসছি সেটা হচ্ছে
না। পার্টিকুলার এইটার বিরুদ্ধে আমরা যেটা করেছি যে ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্টের আগে, মানে ব্রিটিশ ইস্ট ইন্ডিয়ান কোম্পানি আসার পরে আমরা তাদের যে এগুলো তৈরি হয়েছিল প্রোটেস্টগুলো, সেগুলোর একটা অ্যালগোরিদম তৈরি করছি। আর এই হিস্ট্রিটা আমরা জানি মোটামুটি, আমাদের স্কুলে পড়ছি আর কি, সবসময় আমরা এটার মধ্যে দিয়ে বেরিয়ে এসেছি। আর দ্বিতীয় হচ্ছে তারপরে আমরা যেগুলো দেখেছি রিসেন্টলি।
So I will translate and also combine. So these are the particular movements that are part of the institutional educational framework that we have been taught in our schools, and all of these were part of our educational curriculum, and along with that we have also included recent and ongoing protests which are till now going on in India, which are not still a part of like history books, but is also a very much evident important part of the ongoing histories that is being made every day. And how we are interacting with the algorithm, it is also something that how we are shifting every side, how we are placing our bodies in other lands, and how in a lot of aspects this other land is playing an important role, what to show, what to share, and through whose lens it is necessary and whose lens it is necessary to know. And when Rabiul was also reading out there, he also mentioned that who do you think is important enough to know or be curious about? If sometimes we are speaking in Bengali, how much importance does it hold in a place like Netherlands for a people to be curious and search it on their own when we are trying to understand something? As we have been talking with a lot of students also when we came here, and few months back when we visited Milan as well, we find this repetitive information that educational institutions have a very vacant space where the histories or histories pertaining to art is avoided or not shared in particular educational models. And it is the opposite for us. What we have studied as art history and we have studied as movement, it is consisting of the entire world, and there is also evident large part of Western world as well, and the movement that has been going on and like going down in history. Now,
isn't
yes.
it a bit complex as
Yes.
a methodology in the context where we're facing a kind of wars of narratives to say that your audience, or I mean, the audience of public, I don't know how to qualify that, I don't like it that much, will have to do the work themselves. Isn't it counterproductive to say that the audience have to do the work?
Because
give you exactly what is already there. You do the work.
Yeah, because it is a knowledge system that we are trying to produce where everyone is contributor. You are already some of you have contributed through the writings, the resist writing that you have written, and it is a form of Undercommons, which is in process, where the knowledge system does not belong to the one and it goes beyond teaching. It is not the idea of professionalization that we are looking forward to. It is the idea to have a place to put forward questions. It is the idea to go into debate and not only surrender to whatever the structure is wanting us to do. And here, when we are speaking and we are eventually also taking the space as audience, then you are becoming a speaker, a major contributor to whatever the conversation is going on, or to which movement the conversation will unfold. Like if both of you haven't disrupted us while we were reading it out, it would have gone to a different direction. Now it has a total different direction now. So that's why we think it's important to have these undercommon spaces where this idea is not becoming a particular single power thing, which is often also found back in a long time back in India as formans, where it shares what a king or ruler wants to say, but it is the dissemination of power that needs to take place. And right now here we are sharing with you or trying to share with you the burden of our own histories, which is still in 2026, where all we have internet, our mobile phones, we have this opportunity and option to know about the world, but still which are the options that we are selecting or ending up choosing to.
Yeah, we look into the dominant narrative.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the question remains, who decides what is dominant enough? You know?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Sorry, is it okay, or is it taking too much space? I'm addressed also very concretely, because as someone who teaches in the university and also concretely trying to think about what it means to really concretely let's say, the undercommons in the daily life. I was thinking that I don't teach history, but I do a lot of politics of history.
Yes.
And I was thinking that when I was sort of looking at this chronology, I don't know, the way I would sort of teach in the class would be thinking in terms of the shifting canon, because I don't know, that's my, based on sort of the way in which I see the politics of history and reinterpretations of critical reinterpretation. I would think, okay, you said this is in a way the history you learn in school, but then I would imagine that the history that for example, the BJP rewrote the canon that is now taught in the schools, and that sort of there was a previous canon, which was I don't have an idea, but I can guess there was a canon that was the product of a certain kind of pluralistic nationalism and the idea of and the sort of a place that a multiplicity of place. And then there was the BJP, which is similar to what we have also here, the US, bunch of places which is sort of right-wing, ethno-nationalism. But then how do you deal with all these complexities also, because in terms of, because again, I would teach history and say, okay, you see these different ways of narrating history, and if you narrate history in this way, this is in the service as center politics, and narrating it otherwise, it's important to see the past in a different way and think about the future. But I'm very interested in what you do, because you don't really work too much with the content of the chronology, which is sort of, again, I work in a traditional university. I actually, I would work on the form of the chronology, that's the problem, but I would more talk about, exactly who decides what is written here, who are for example, I think that was a good example, is it only Gandhi who is the leader, or there were other people that in nationalist history, even the progressive one, has erased. So I'm very curious about how you do the operation. You work in a way with the form. And sort of, I just want to learn more, sort of, in terms of how you work with the form of history rather than the content.
To begin with, what we had in our educational system, it's also massively adapted, like what the Western world has given us. And now the Europe has moved out of that decorum. They are going into different ways, different forms of institution and exploring. But in India, we are still in the same structure that was once given to us by white supremacists. We are still trying to figure out and trying to fix the same structure which is already given to us. But in some sense, this idea of who decides what goes into the history or who becomes the face of it, it's also goes back to this idea of who writes that history. It goes back to this idea of whose history it is, because we believe that history has multiple truths. It has multiple lies as well. And our history is like so much layered. It is layered in like black and white, gray, blue, green hierarchies, caste, religion, class, which was there so much ingrained even before Britishers came. The marginalization and the class discrimination that was already there, and this particular very idea of professionalization that came into scenario of who will do what work, that made this classification of class and caste into a more broader phenomena. So the timeline is the most recent one that is still now happening in Madhya Pradesh in this year. That is the Ken Betwa protests. See? So 2026 Madhya Pradesh ও বুন্দেলখণ্ড অঞ্চলে কেন কেন বেতওয়া নদী সংযোগ প্রকল্পের বিরুদ্ধে আদিবাসী ও কৃষকরা আন্দোলন শুরু করেন। তারা বন ধ্বংস, বাস্তুচ্যুতি, পান্না টাইগার রিজার্ভের পরিবেশগত ক্ষতির বিরোধিতা করেন। আন্দোলনের ফলে সরকার ক্ষতিপূরণ ও পুনর্বাসন নীতির পুনর্বিবেচনা করতে বাধ্য হয়। Along with there are other like student-led protests that took place within institutions, for institution and that also kind of created a power against the dominant right-wing power.
So this is a watershed moment when Rohit Vemula's death in 2016 became a defining moment for student and Dalit movements in India. A PhD scholar at the University of Hyderabad, he died after facing suspension, exclusion, and discrimination within the institution.
Just to disrupt Amshu, the note that was written by Rohit, it's on the back side of the paper, and it starts with saying good morning, so that you can relate to.
So his death was widely described by students and activists as an institutional murder, drawing attention to the ways caste-based inequalities and systemic violence continue to shape universities and public life in India. And this set off a spark of a decade-wide student protest and confronting the institution and also the state. Because, mind you, these are state-led institutions that are now completely defunct and completely co-opted by the right wing. And that's what when Sanchayan was talking about how Vishwabharati is now, Shantinikethan now, is also a central university which comes in the central government, cannot be not thought about. So I will read the suicide note of Rohit Vemula, and this is very important because this basically was the watershed moment that really sparked conversations in Dalit practices and ideas, but also student protests, what a student means, what an institution means. Followed by, I think Ritu will read a list of student protesters that happened in the last decade. So, good morning. I would not be around when you read this letter. Don't get angry on me. I know some of you truly cared for me, loved me and treated me well. I have no complaints on anyone. It was always with myself I had problems. I feel a growing gap between my soul and my body and have become a monster. I always wanted to be a writer of science like Carl Sagan. At last, this is the only letter I'm getting to write. I always wanted to be a writer of science like Carl Sagan. I loved science, stars, nature, but then I love people without knowing that people have long since divorced from nature. Our feelings are second-handed. Our love is constructed, our beliefs colored, our originality valid through artificial art. It has become truly difficult to love without getting hurt. The value of a man was reduced to his immediate identity and nearest possibility, to a vote, to a number, to a thing. Never was a man treated as a mind, as a glorious thing made up of stardust in every field, in studies, in streets, in politics, and in dying and living. I am writing this kind of letter for the first time, my first time of a final letter. Forgive me if I fail to make sense. My birth is my fatal accident. I can never recover from my childhood loneliness, the unappreciated child from my past. Maybe I was wrong all the while in understanding world, in understanding love, pain, death, life. There was no urgency. But I always was rushing, desperate to start a life. All the while, some people, for them, life itself is hers. My birth is my fatal accident. I can never recover from my childhood loneliness, the unappreciated child from my past. I'm not hurt at this moment. I'm not sad. I'm just empty, unconcerned about myself. That's pathetic, and that's why I'm doing this. People may dub me as a coward, as selfish or stupid once I'm gone. I'm not bothered about what I am called. I do not believe in after-death stories, ghosts or spirits. If there's anything at all, I believe that I can travel to the stars and know about other worlds. If you, who's reading this letter, can do anything for me, I have to get 7 months of my fellowship, 1,75,000 rupees. Please see to it that my family is paid that. I have to give some 40,000 to Ramji. He never asked them back, but please pay that to him from that. Let my funeral be silent and smooth. Behave like I just appeared and gone. Do not shed tears for me. Know that I am happy dead than being alive. From shadows to the stars. Uma Anna, sorry for using your room for this thing. To ASA family, sorry for disappointing all of you. You love me very much. I wish all the very best for the future. One last time, Jai Bhim. I forgot to write the formalities. No one is responsible for this act of killing myself. No one has instigated me, whether by their acts or by their words to this act. This is my decision, and I am the only one responsible for this. Do not trouble my friends, enemies on this after I am gone.
Thank you also.
There are list and ongoing list of protests that are led by students, some of which are Jadavpur University Folk Cholera protest, which is in 2014, then FTII protest 2015. Student body leaders of FTII notable voices included student representative like Vikas Urs and others from FTII Student Association. Occupy UGC movement 2015. Sehla Rashid student group like AISA, SFI. Then Rohit Vemula movement 2016. GNU sedition protest 2016. BHU women's safety protest 2017. 2019 JNU fee hike protest. 2019-2020 Jamia Millia Islamia anti-CAA protest. AMU anti-CAA protest 2019-20. Anti-CAA NRC student movement nationwide in the same years. Umar Khalid, Afrin Fatima, Sephora Zargar, student groups from JNU, Jamia, AMU. JNU masked attack protest 2020. Student farmer protest in 2020 and 2021. These are only a few list of protests that we were able to share, and till now, as we all are still in this room, I would also like to share that for the past 1.5 months, one of our friends, our classmate, is still in jail. It is going to be nearly 2 months now, and the reason she and few of our group mates are in jail right now is that they raised their voice. They supported the workers' protest that was happening in Noida, and suddenly they were approached by the police while returning by metro, and from that metro station the police took them in, and till now we are not able to get in touch with them. We have people from all the places that know Srishti, that know other members of Progressive Artist League in Delhi. We are trying to reach out to them. We are trying to find a way through lawyers how to get to them and get them out. But the larger question still remains, like in India, what are the prices that we have to pay when we raise our voices, when we raise our creativities, when we raise our intellectual beings into a free space, which we feel is not free anymore. For the first time, in the first week of this month, May, I clearly remember this date, 4th of May. For the first time after independence in West Bengal, particularly the state from where we are, the right-wing government has successfully occupied the state, and they are in power in the state starting of this year. So the home that we left before coming here is not going to be the same home that we are going to return to once we go back. And the most vicious thing will be the moral policing that we will be facing once we go back. So as I said so, Fred Morton and Stefano Harney also mentions in their book that the Undercommons is therefore always an unsafe neighborhood. And I know we are really running super late, and I see Bruno is here. And as a reminder to that, if anyone has anything to add, anything to ask, or anything more to add, And little request that all of the questions that you are carrying with you, please feel free to discuss that with us. We have our email ID over there as well. Please.
I would have lots of questions.
Yes.
I really find this, history writing and history teaching is also very important. And I just wanted to mention something, and I don't know whether you work with the whole tradition of subaltern studies, because that for many of us has really kind of been and in a way it's the beginning of post-colonial, the whole post-colonial studies, not so it's that critical tradition, and I think it's also very interesting because itself, subaltern studies is not. It's very Indian, and now please, but it's also extremely very interconnected with all the sort of other traditional critical thinking, sort of around, let's say, academic ways of writing history. And sort of I find it really interesting also to connect sort of this methodology of approaching historical narratives. And the other thing would be, so that's, I don't know the kind of collaborations you have, but I think a little bit in the spirit of a lot of the sort of kind of work that I do, is there something concretely that you might do to support your work?
Yeah, that would be lovely to discuss. Yeah.
If you have also kind of also concrete things and that's which is also about the relationship, it's a way of both supporting each other, because I learned a lot from you today. But also kind of giving back and creating sort of a relation, maybe the beginning of an infrastructure. So
it's always that we are always looking forward to infrastructures being built with people, and where we are also trying to understand institution as people, not as standing pedestals, not as four-walled structures. So within that understanding also, we are imagining Undercommons as an example where these structures of what to teach or how to learn or what history is to be considered as something teachable, to be made with people together, and not coming from a single entity. As we are all discussing over here tonight, these collective contributions can make towards a model. And this also leads us to this last question, if we coming from India share a model or create a model in a way, will institutions over here allow us to run it, or will the institution accept and adapt the model with care and relationships even after we are gone from here? But this is something that we can think about all together.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
For sticking out so late. Sorry, it's super hot in here.